I don't think people truly understand how good it is to have Virginia Tech be good at football once again. Brent Pry is doing a great job, a tremendous job of getting his team to play quality football, and it's great to have Virginia Tech be at this point. And Sandman is going to be relevant once again. We're going to see that more often in big games too, which is great. It's the best entrance in college football. That to me is undisputed. There's not a better entrance than enter Sandman in a ranked game featuring Virginia Tech, who's playing really good football. Today, we take a deep dive into the Virginia Tech Hokies and look at what could be in 2024. Before we do that, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. Again, we are getting ever close to the college football season, and we are going to continue adding to that countdown with Virginia Tech today. Brent Pry deserves a lot of love for what he's done so far with the Hokies. He's done an incredible job of recruiting the right guys, using the transfer portal. I think that this has been a really fun team to watch, and they are ahead of schedule. I think that a lot of people expected them to take a year or two before they were able to get to where they needed to be. And I think that Brent Pry decided, no, we're not waiting for that. We're going to take matters into our own hands, and we are going to make sure that we are playing the football that we want to play. And it's been really fun to watch. It's been an exciting group. And when you look at what they have returning, that should continue in 2024. You also added a little bit of talent in the transfer portal. I think the one nice thing about this team is that they didn't have to add a ton of talent because they returned so many players. You add players like Colin Schlee, the backup Kyron Drones. You also bring in guys like Montavious Cunningham to add to the offensive line, whether it's as a starter or as a depth piece. You'll also add Aeneas Peebles from Duke. You also get Kelvin Gilliam from Oklahoma. Those are two guys that will play big roles on the interior defensive line. But for the most part, you didn't have to add a ton of talent, which speaks to where, again, where Brent Pry has this program. You have a lot of exciting things coming in to Blacksburg, and you have a lot of reason to believe that this is going to be a fun team to watch. And when you look at the guys that they lost, I don't necessarily have too many concerns about the talent level that departs. You obviously lose some players that you'd like to have back, or some contributors that you'd like to have back. But again, you brought in enough players to take over, and replace some of those guys. I think that you are feeling good if you're a Virginia Tech fan about where this team is in terms of talent level. And now it's just a matter of, can you take that step forward? Can you take things to another level and get to where you want to be? And a lot of that stems from the belief in Kyron Jones and what he can do in Tyler Bowen's offense. I think that you're looking at a guy who is a special player. When you look at his dual threat abilities, Kyron Jones is someone who can help this team, and he's going to be the X factor for this offense, honestly, to me, because if you're able to take a step forward, completed under 60% of his passes. You'd like to see his completion percentage increase a little bit. Threw for over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns. He did take care of the football, only threw 3 interceptions. So that's something you have to build upon. You have to be able to expect him to take care of the football and make sure that you're giving your team plenty of opportunities to score points. And he's going to play a big role in that. Also had 818 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. So he is someone who is going to be, like I said, a major factor in what this team wants to do. This is going to be a really fun offense to watch because of Kyron Drones. Yes, they have plenty of talent, but it's the quarterback position that's really going to get them where they need to be. Like I said, we mentioned Colin Schlee comes in. That's an interesting addition. Someone who can be a really fun player to watch behind Kyron Drones, has a really explosive skill set. You saw what he did at UCLA. The passing obviously isn't his biggest strength, but 425 yards on just 42 carries, that's pretty explosive if you're running football. So you feel pretty good about maybe having some sub packages for him, bringing him in certain situations. And if not, then you go to William Pop Watson, someone who can be a bright star in the future. You would obviously not like to go to him too early. You want to make sure that he is getting value reps behind Schlee and Drone. So you'd like to see him sit on the bench and, develop that way. But if you have to, you have some interesting options behind drones, obviously. Then you get to the running backs. And the running backs to me have a chance to take a huge step forward. When you look at what Bicel Tootin did last year, 863 yards, 10 touchdowns. This is an FCS transfer that a lot of people, including myself, I'll admit that, I was kind of skeptical about his ability to compete at the FBS level, and he exceeded expectations. He silenced the doubters for sure, and his pairing with Kyron Drones makes this backfield one of the more exciting backfields in college football. Malachi Thomas comes in behind him, should play a big role in that rotation as well. So he is someone that will play a more prominent role once again. And that's really good because you need depth at the running back position, especially in this conference. You need to have depth at running back. You need to have guys that are going to, everybody's going to get tired. That's the one thing. So you're going to have guys that need breaks. And having a guy like Malachi Thomas, even Jeremiah Coney coming in, the redshirt freshman, could be really fun to watch if he is asked to play a bigger role in 2024. So that's something to keep an eye on too. But again, this is a team that has a lot of things to be excited about. And this is a team playing with a ton of confidence coming into 2024. Now you just have to find a way to take a step in your development and also take a step in terms of winning football games. It's going to be tough. You don't have the surprise factor anymore. People know that you're back and ready to make some more noise. So you have to find ways to move the football on the ground through the air. And throwing the ball should be easy for Kyron Drones if everything goes to plan. And when you look at what they have coming back at the wide receiver and tight end position, this is a group that you should feel pretty excited about. Everything starts with Daquan Felton. And this is also, you lost a couple players that were contributors last year to the transfer portal. So you have certain players that need to step up and play better in terms of the backups. But you have guys like Daquan Felton coming back, 667 yards, 8 touchdowns, average 17.6 yards per catch, explosive weapon. Ali Jennings is back from injury. He and Aiden Green will probably battle it out for that spot. Jennings can be an explosive player. He's someone who at Old Dominion destroyed Virginia Tech, and they finally decided, hey, we don't want to play you anymore. We want you to be on our team. Do that. So he is someone, if he can stay healthy, very, very, very explosive deep threat, a very good deep threat for Virginia Tech. And I think that he is going to be really fun if he can stay healthy. Green is going to push him for that time, even if he is healthy, though. Jalen Lane comes back, more of that slot receiver, 538 yards and 6 touchdowns for him. He is definitely going to be a fun player to watch in this offense if they're even able to take a step forward and be more explosive as well. Stephen Goss now comes back. The senior had a solid season last year where he had 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged nearly 16 yards per catch. Tucker Holloway is another guy to keep an eye on. Keelan Adams is a freshman. Chance Fitzgerald is redshirt freshman. Those are two young guys that expect to play a larger role and later in their careers, but they could be asked to take steps forward and play bigger roles if something doesn't go to plan. You also have a number of other options with them as well. The tight end position is interesting. Nick Gallo comes back after missing the entire 2023 season. His 2022 season, he caught 30 passes for 256 yards. He will be someone that is a veteran that can help these pass catchers take that step. Benji Gosnell is also going to play a role as well. Had 12 catches last year for 137 yards and 1 touchdown. So keep an eye on that tight end position. Harrison St. Germain, a redshirt freshman. Juricus Hairston, another redshirt freshman. Those are guys who could play more prominent roles if health becomes a concern for the tight end position. Again, if Gallo is struggling to stay on the field or they need a spark, they may turn to some of those younger guys to get the job done. Then that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that this is a group that could have a major impact on this offense. And when you look at what they did last year, this is a group that finished 97th. They finished 23rd in rushing and 97th in passing. The passing attack must get better. If you are going to win more football games, you have to find a way to get better at being more balanced and throwing the football more. And a lot of that is on Kyron Drones, obviously, but the passing attack and the weapons they have downfield also must step up and deliver as well. Then you go to the offensive line, obviously. That's a group that needs to play a big role as well. And you have plenty of experience. You have plenty of returning talent as well. So you have options. This is where you get really excited because you look at the returning talent. You have pretty much every starter that you want back coming back in 2024. And really, the only new fresh face that you're getting is maybe a Montavious Cunningham. Guy is going to start at guard. He's going to compete with Bob Schick, I should say, for the starting guard position, the right guard position. But then after that, you have guys that are pretty much reliable and have experience. The exception being Parker Clements or Johnny Garrett at the right tackle position. Xavier Chaplin is back, starts 13 games in his career. Braylon Moore and his brother Caden are back as well. Plenty of experience at the left guard and center position. We talked about Cunningham and Schick. This is an offensive line that I expect some pretty big things from in 2024. The offense has big goals for this year, and a lot of that stems from the success that the offensive line can display. If they're able to have a lot of success, if they're able to move people as well as I think they can, then you're looking at a team that is going to win a lot of football games and surprise a lot of people once again. You still have somewhat of the surprise factor if you're Virginia Tech because of the fact that people probably don't expect you to compete with the Florida States, the Clemsons, those top teams in the ACC. And that is the chip on the shoulder that this team needs. Pry has a great team. His roster is very intact, and obviously health is going to play a big role in how successful they actually are. But when you look at what they have, is going to be a fun offense. And this offense has the ability to take things to another level. You have an offensive line that has experience. You have good depth. You have great depth at the skill positions as well. You just need to stay healthy. That's probably the biggest thing is health. Have to stay healthy because it's going to be a tough conference to win. It's going to be tough to surprise people, and you have to find ways for certain people to take steps forward. Then you go to the defense. Now, this defense is going to be, I think, really fun. This is a group that finished fourth against the pass. And they also finished 20th in total yards per game. So they were good at keeping teams in check largely. And I think that you're going to see a group that has a couple pieces to identify in terms of who's going to start, but you also have plenty of returning talent. And there's a lot of exciting talent on this roster. We start with the defensive line. This is a pretty obvious starting four, but you also have pretty solid depth behind them. On the edges, you have Cole Nelson coming back. The 6'3", 249-pound senior is back after a solid season in which he had 27 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Opposite of him is going to be Antoine Paul Ryland. The senior comes back after a huge year for him. I think everybody expected big things from him, and he delivered on those. 40 tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. That's a big year for a Virginia Tech edge player that you needed to see big things from. Aeneas Peebles, we talked about him. That was a good get for Virginia Tech. Comes in from Duke, 43 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss. I think that you're looking at someone 5 sacks as well. A very good playmaker for the Duke Blue Devils, looking for a new home. Joins a defensive line that needs some tackle help. They had good tackles, I think, last year in terms of talent. Moves either of those to graduation, NFL draft, transfer portal. Now you have some holes to fill. So Peoples needs to stay healthy. That's probably the biggest thing. You also see Kelvin Gilliam coming in from Oklahoma, a little bit more inexperience than his partner there, but you also expect some big things from him. Behind them is really where things are going to be interesting because you don't have a ton of proven depth. Kamari Copeland comes in from Iowa Western, has experience, but again, playing in junior college is very different than playing in the ACC. You also have certain young players that might be able to step up and play bigger roles if health is a concern for any of these guys. Andrew Hanchuk could play a big role as a freshman. Josh Fuga and Wilfred Penne could be guys that are in that rotation as well. So you have some guys that are going to potentially play bigger roles than maybe you were ready for them to. And that could be a problem. But at the same time, I think that says a lot about the talent level that they bring in. They have guys who are ready to play. They have guys that can exceed expectations. And that starting group is good. As long as they can stay healthy, I think you're set for a pretty good year. The edge is where you have a little bit more depth You get CJ McCray back, 21 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks for him. You also have Keyshawn Burgos coming back, 18 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. The edge is set. The edge is deep. The tackle position is going to be a little bit concerning just because of the lack of depth and the lack of experience, but the talent level is definitely there. So there's one thing to hang your hat on. You definitely have plenty of talent. You have plenty of options. It's just a matter of, can you put it all together on the field? Can you find depth? Can you stay healthy? Because if you can stay healthy and stay on the field and be productive, this is going to be a really fun team to watch. The linebackers fit right into that role as well in terms of having plenty of talent. They also, I think, have some really interesting depth pieces that we'll dive into here. We'll talk about the starters here. Keely Lawson is coming back after an 80 tackle season, also had 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 6 passes defended, 1 interception. Absolute stud at linebacker, 6'4", 220 pounds, someone who is going to be an absolute monster for this defense. You also add Sam Brumfield from Middle Tennessee to that defense. They expect some big things from him. 81 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks for the Blue Raiders. He will be really fun to watch in this defense. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a transition for him, but he is someone who has experience. He's a veteran presence that can do a lot of good things for this team, and it'll be fun to see how he handles that transition to a more difficult level in terms of playing the linebacker position. You also have at the star position, Kanata Jenkins. Last year had 50 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. He is someone who is really fun to watch. He is back for another year. The senior comes in with good size and good length to be able to play the star position, kind of that hybrid role. Everybody has one nowadays. And Kanata Jenkins is going to be one of those guys that you need to pay attention to and could play a pivotal role for this defense. Behind them is where things get interesting. You have guys like JD McDonald coming back, someone who has plenty of experience. So you're not necessarily worried about, are you able to find certain players that can step up, but you have plenty of options. Caleb Woodson could be another guy that fits that role behind Keely Lawson as well. Jaden Keller, 23 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Gabe Williams is a freshman to keep an eye on. He is someone who this staff, I think, really likes, and I could see some playing time early in his career with the Hokies. So the linebacker position, again, has good starters, and I think has some quality depth pieces as well. It's just a matter of how deep is that linebacker room? How deep can they go, and how many guys can they rely on? Because you're going to put 2 to 3 guys on the field at a time. You're going to need 4, 5, 6 guys, maybe, depending on how long the season is, especially if you're going to make a run. This is a Virginia Tech team that has a good front, a good front seven. And it's just a matter of, can the starters stay healthy? And if not, what is the depth pieces? What do they look like? And how are they able to step up if called upon earlier than expected? Then we go to the secondary. The secondary did lose a couple of pieces in this group. However, this is a really fun group to watch. The cornerback position specifically is I think you have 2 of the better cornerbacks in college football in Mansour Delane. You also have Dorian Strong. These are 2 guys that can be shut down corners, and a big reason why they finished 4th against the pass last year. So the cornerback positions appear set. The safety positions, maybe you have a couple more concerns, but I still think you have a lot of excitement in Jalen Stroman and then Mose Phillips, or you're looking at whoever is going to start at the safety positions. Maybe that's Jalen Jones or Mose Phillips at the strong safety position. But Jalen Stroman is going to be fun to watch. I think that this is still a very talented group. It's just a matter of, again, depth is going to be a concern behind those guys. You don't have a ton of experience behind those 4. Besides, obviously, Phillips and Jones are probably going to compete and rotate in, but Dante Lovett is probably the most experienced of the guys behind him. 10 tackles last year, 3 passes defended. But again, Delaney and Strong shouldn't be coming off the field unless they're hurt or need a breather. So I don't expect there to be too many concerns about the depth. You're obviously going to want those guys to get reps as much as possible. You just like to see the starters more. Kind of the theme with this defense. You like the starters. You have questions about the depth. When you look at behind Strong, Braylon Johnson could be someone that plays a bigger role. I know Quentin Reddish at the safety position is someone who could figure into the rotation. The staff really likes what they see in him. He is someone that could take on a much more prominent role when it comes to the secondary. But again, this is a secondary that has plenty of talent. There's a reason why they finished fourth against the pass. They are good at doing what they do, and that is preventing teams from moving the ball downfield. Now, when you look at who they face this year, that group is going to be asked to shut down some pretty talented and pretty explosive offenses. So that's going to be a challenge. However, I think that this is a group that has plenty of talent to be able to accept that challenge and rise to the occasion. I really like this group. Dorian Strong is someone who I've been high on for a while. Even when he had his down years, you had someone who definitely had the talent and a big bounce back year in 2023, reminded everyone that he is that guy. Now, when you look at the schedule is really where things are going to be dictated. You're going to learn how good this team can actually be. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they start things off because when you look at the first game, you're looking at a trip to Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt obviously is the worst team in the SEC. However, it's an SEC team. That is a team that you cannot take lightly, and it's also on the road. I think that this is a team that has plenty of talent to beat Virginia Tech, but I also like Virginia Tech in this game. You also get Marshall at home after that. Marshall is going to be a team that plays with a chip on their shoulder. They are going to be very, very motivated to upset Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech has lost to Sunbelt teams before. Just ask Old Dominion how that's gone. Speaking of Old Dominion, they go to Old Dominion. Now, this is a year where there's a lot of Power Five or whatever we're calling them now, teams that are heading to Group of Five stadiums. They are heading to those teams, not playing neutral site games, not just doing for two for ones. They're going to travel to and the two for ones where they do two home games and one neutral. This is they are going to Old Dominion, and that's going to be really interesting to watch. But again, 3-0 start is not out of the question. The fourth game against Rutgers is where things could get very interesting. Rutgers is expected to have a big year. They're really high on what they expect for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. This is a team that could be very tough to beat. But again, if Virginia Tech is where they need to be, that can also be a win for this program. Then we dive into ACC play. And the ACC is so interesting this year, as evident as we see in Virginia Tech's schedule. Now, at Miami, after you play Rutgers on a 6-day break, you're going to get a very tough test. And this is where we're going to find out real quick if Virginia Tech is legit. Can they beat a team like Miami? Miami has playoff on their mind. Virginia Tech is going to have to play their best. And I don't know if that's going to be enough to even just play their best, but we will see. That is a game that's going to be really fun to watch. And it's going to be probably a ranked matchup. That's what makes it really interesting. I think that if both teams are playing at the level they should be, that'll be really fun to watch, and it will be a ranked matchup. Then you go all the way to Stanford on October 5th. That is a long trip. And while Stanford isn't as good as Virginia Tech is right now, Troy Taylor is doing a great job of rebuilding that program. Stanford could be a tough game, and it's on the West Coast. You have to travel all the way over there. That's what makes this thing so interesting. You do get a bye week, though, to prepare for Boston College, who comes to Blacksburg on a Thursday night. And then you get another long break before you have to play Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is going to be tough. But again, those are winnable games. Then you go to Syracuse. That is a tough one to play. Fran Brown and that team should be playing really well, even in year one. But again, I think that Virginia Tech's in a good spot where they can win that game. And then a home game against Clemson, that's more than likely going to be a loss. It feels like the Clemson game and the Miami game are probably the two most likely losses. Then you get a bye before you travel to Duke. Virginia Tech leads that series 19 to 11. So this has been a series that has gone Virginia Tech's way. And then you end the season with the rivalry game in Virginia. So when you're looking at what is the ceiling for this team, what is the floor? The ceiling for this team, honestly, realistically, I can see 10-2. I think that even if I'm looking this optimistically, they're going to lose the Clemson game and probably the Miami game. But other than that, this is a team that can definitely win every other game. That is definitely a realistic possibility. When you look at the floor, I think that this is a team that finishes 7-6 last year. Brent Pry expects bigger things. A bowl game is probably the bare minimum that they'll expect. I think that 7-5 would be a pretty decent floor. Again, when we talk floor, I think so far in this series, it's been hard for people to understand that a floor is like everything's going wrong. Nothing is going right. Things are imploding. That's not good. And obviously you don't want that, but that's what the floor is. And I think a 7-5 floor is very good for Virginia Tech. This is a very fun team to watch, a very interesting team heading into 2024. And if things go really right, Enter Sandman is going to be so relevant. It's probably going to be one of the most played videos on YouTube. It's going to be one of the more popular songs because Virginia Tech is playing so well. In the college football world, Virginia Tech is going to be a really fun team to watch. And it's going to be interesting to see how things play out when they don't have the surprise factor, but they will play with a chip on their shoulder. And that could be enough to get them to the level they want to reach this year.